Today I'm working on a new square for my memory blanket. If you're new here, this is a new segment that I've been doing called Knit and Chat. This is the second episode actually, and basically it's just something that I want to keep for 15-20 minutes tops, and just kind of talk about whatever's on my mind, if there's anything on my mind. So yeah, that's what this is. My name is Alicia, and I have a hand-dyed yarn business outside of Nashville called APLCrafts Fine Yarn, and you can find it on Etsy, and then you can find my socials on BlueSky and Instagram, and all that is linked below. And I also have a dye channel where I teach you to dye yarn in a very lazy manner, so you don't have to worry about measuring scoops and whatever, but you're not really being wasteful either. And that's linked below as well. So last month, I don't remember, I think it was just basic ramblings or whatever, and I said that this time I would probably go through some of my upbringing or some background or whatever. I am not good at storytelling. And what I mean by that is, I'll be right here, and then, all of a sudden that makes me think of something else, and so I start with a story over here, which makes me think of something else, and I start with a story over here, and then I remember where I started, and I'll go back over here. I'm going to try very hard to be as linear as possible, but I cannot make promises. So, I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, in what we call the inner city. So if you're not familiar with what an inner city is, you got your city environment, and then you have your hood environment. That's where the projects are, that's where the ghetto is, it's where all the shootings are, all that stuff. That's where I grew up. There was a park across the street from me, which was nice growing up, until it kind of got run over by drug dealers on a corner, who actually lived right next door to me. And I didn't think about it until I was older that gunshots were so normal that I never even thought about it. Sometimes I hear stories about people who would duck in their homes, and we never did that. It was just, I don't know, it just never happened. But anyway, I really should put a trigger warning at the beginning of this. Oh boy. So yeah, I grew up, I'm not gonna say what street I grew up on, but that park's still there, so you might be able to figure it out on maps or something. When I got into my, well, no, see, I'm really skipping around now. I'm trying not to do that. So one story I remember when I was a kid, and I don't know if there's schools like this now, let me know, because I feel like we're reverting back to the 80s in some ways. When you tell stories about your childhood, no matter what it is, do you not realize how messed up they are until you actually tell them, right? And so to me, it was completely normal to tell people that, when we went to the bathroom, we didn't have toilet paper, we had to, drip dry, and sometimes we didn't have soap, so we just had to rub our hands with the water, and then, but it wasn't even sometimes, it was actually more often than not. So it's actually a good day when there was toilet paper and soap at the same time. This was elementary school in the 80s. By middle school, I think everything was, I don't remember having to do any of that. So maybe the 80s was just a rough time. I don't know. So anyway, that's neighborhood stuff. And I lived there until I was 14. No. I moved junior year. So how old was I? 16. 16 going on 17. As far as family background, I'm mixed. I don't know if you could tell that. Some people can't tell because I blend in with 3/4 of the world. So my father, for sake of argument, because I'm not going to get into it, is black, and my mother's white. My grandparents on my mom's side were missionaries, and they went to Portugal and Bermuda and Canada, and for some reason I thought they started some churches, but apparently they just pastored, which was news to me because I really thought growing up that they had started a church in Portugal and then started 2 churches in Portugal, but apparently they hadn't, and started a church in Bermuda, but apparently they hadn't. They just pastored there. Anyway, so they were missionaries and pastors. My mom was a pastor's kid, so if you know anything about pastor's kids, they grow up and when they leave the house, they do all the wild things, you know, which I have to say, I think left me a little bit more balanced in the way when it comes to like spiritual matters and stuff, because we didn't grow up in a strict household spiritually like my mom would have. So, you know, we went to church, we did the things, joined the clubs, all that stuff. We were there Sunday, we were there Wednesday, and then all the extracurricular stuff, we were there. But I had the choice when I was 12 whether or not I wanted to keep going. So I was like, no, I don't want to go anymore. But mostly I didn't want to go anymore because I got tired of dressing up. I do not like to dress up. To this day, I don't like to dress up. Formal for me is business casual, just to give you an idea. So I stopped going to church for a little while. Then I went back when I was like, I don't know, 15 or 16 to another type of church. Oh, I grew up evangelical. So if you know anything about evangelical Christians, I don't know what happened to them. They were bad before, but they went out in left field. So I don't know what that is that's going on now. I don't associate with that. I stopped associating with that a long time ago. When I went back when I was in my teenage years, I was in a non-denominational. But I'm not really going to focus a lot on the church stuff. I'm just trying to get some background in there. Like I said, I'm not a good storyteller. When I was after high school, I ran away, quote unquote, and joined the military. Actually, I wanted to run away when I was 12, and when I was counting down the years as to when I can get out of the house. At that point, when I was 12 to 14 years old, we had cops at the house all the time because my brothers were always doing something on the streets. So it was a very common occurrence to have cops at the house, and I'll leave that at that. So I was counting down the years to when I could get out. So when I was in high school, as a lot of recruiters do, they go into your high school and try to get you to join up. And me being a smart ass, I was like, oh, let me just, F around and see what they're all about. I had no intentions on joining the military. Now, I need to tell you that almost everybody on both sides of the family are military. So I should have figured out in my head that, some kind of switch would click on and oh, military, here you go. This is where you belong. So, long story short, I joined the Army National Guard, and I went to MOS school to be a medic. So I did that for a little bit. Met my ex-husband during basic training, and then we started dating, if you can call it dating when you're training. It's not really, if you know, you know. Started doing that when we went to Texas for our medical training, and then got married at a courthouse in San Antonio, and then went our separate ways because that's how it goes. Just because you got married don't mean you're going to be at the same place. So he went off to Colorado where he got stationed, and I went back to Connecticut. Found out I was pregnant, and there's actually this was under Clinton. So at this time, Clinton was downsizing the military. So it was actually kind of easy for me to be able to do paperwork to get moved to Colorado, and then I would be put on what do they call it? It's like reserve, but inactive reserve. That's what they called it, inactive reserve. So I was no longer getting paid, no longer doing drills, any of that stuff. But it finished out my 4x4, 4 years active, 4 years reserve. So it did that. So I was able to go to Colorado because I wouldn't have been able to transfer because there was nothing there for me to do any of that. So that's how they worked it out. Had my son at Fort Carson, and that's actually having my son while in the military is one of the reasons why he's an only child. Now, he does have a stepbrother, but the only reason why he's an only child from my body, I'm not gonna lie, is because that bill, that hospital bill at Fort Carson for 3 days, was it 3 days I was in there? 3 days, 4 days? I think I left on the 4th day. $75. Shit you not. This is why I never had another kid, because I knew if I ever had another kid, that bill, I'd probably still be paying that bill 20 years later. I'll put it that way. So, yay military for that. Although we didn't yay military for anything else. We drilled it into our kid. He ain't going. And he had no intention on going. So, and he hasn't. But I loved Colorado. We lived in an apartment that was the backyard, not the backyard, the back patio part, balcony, had a perfect view for Pikes Peak. And I loved it. You know, being, you have to remember, like, you know, inner city, and then I'm going and I got this damn mountain view, this very popular mountain view, right outside my freaking window, in the barrio. I didn't even know what a barrio was. It's just another name for a hood. I didn't even know I was living in a hood, because let me tell you what, I was like, this is a hood. Could have fooled me. I thought it was pretty decent, but whatever. I guess for Colorado Springs, you know, because that's where we lived, because we didn't live on base. I guess for Colorado Springs it was considered hood. Whatever. Everybody's got their perspectives. So during the downsize, he took, I don't know if he took the option to leave, or I don't remember what happened there, but anyway, we moved back east, and we moved into my mom's house for a little bit, and then after a year or so we moved to Pennsylvania, and after that we got divorced. I moved back home to Connecticut and lived in my mom's house for like a year or so, and then that didn't turn out too good, and then there's a whole lot of issues I ain't going to get into right now with the kid and stuff, and then so he had to go back and live with his father in Pennsylvania, and I moved out and started renting a room in a house. So that Timberland song, I can't think of the name right now, I'll put it on the bottom. I relate. I don't have a house, I rent a room in a house. Yeah, that was me. I got a t-shirt for that one, several different places. So did that for a little bit, and then what did I do after that? I was working at Walmart, so I transferred my job to Connecticut. Started doing online dating, which was very new at the time and embarrassing to tell anybody that you were online dating. Like, you didn't tell people that you met somebody online. That's how new it was. And I went on, what was it called? Gothic Meetup, gothmatch.com, something like that. Because yes, goth sometimes it's not a face, sometimes it's still in your heart, and I know I don't show goth anymore, but it's still in my heart, y'all, so don't judge. Anyway, so I went on there and found my my husband, and the only reason why we met was because I had a friend that I grew up with during my teenage years who was in Nashville, who went to Tribeca, and so I was able to stay with her for, I don't know, a few days or something like that. Did that a few times, and was able to meet my husband, and so that's how that happened. And then she moved back up to Connecticut. So yeah, anyway, so all that to say, then I've been down here for 20 years. I did not plan to stay here this long. I was actually really used to being a nomad, going from place to place. This is the longest I've stayed anywhere. And mostly I did that just to raise the kids, and now they're raised and I'm still here, and I'm like, why? Although really it's like every state has their good things and their bad things, and I guess you just kind of get used to the flow. So yeah, anyway, so I've been here for 20 years, and yeah, I worked in a bakery. I actually transferred from Connecticut to down here working for Panera. Might as well just say I worked for Panera. And I was a baker, which, you know, Panera is not the Panera that it was back then. I'm going to be honest. Back then, they were very, they were very much all about their clean food and where it came from. And they made sure you knew about the company, how it ran, where the food came from. Especially with the bakers, you had to know everything about the dough, how the cows were treated, all that stuff. So I stayed there until I was the baker side and the daytime manager side are run differently. So the best way I can explain, because it was overnight, it's not overnight anymore. When they were overnight, they had their own teams of management, and so I was essentially the assistant manager over the bakers for Nashville when we had 12 stores, cafes. We had 12 cafes. Since then, I think they've exploded to like 20 cafes. I opened up 2 in Connecticut, and I opened up, oh, what did I open up down here? I opened up Murfreesboro. I opened up oh my God, the one right across the street from Centennial. They're not even open anymore. They closed a long time ago. I opened up that one. I opened up Fifth and Commerce, which is still there. Oh my God. I think I opened Cool Springs. I opened up Cool Springs. Yeah. Anyway, I opened up Murfreesboro when I was also planning a wedding, so that was fun. Yeah. What else do I want to say? So anyway, I did that for a really long time. And then I got tired of it. We actually quit. And they kept calling me back. I'm not even kidding. It was, we were going through some kind of management problem with like the upper management. And they're like, do you want to come back? And blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know. So I went back to be a day baker, which is sort of like what they have now, but not really. Because like the day baker position back then was you went and mingled with the customers and handed out samples and stuff. They don't do that now. They just have bakers during the day. So I did that. And actually, I'm grateful for that job because that actually helped me to talk to people because I would never talk to anyone before. And now just like, I have no problem talking to strangers. So that really, you know, helped me. And I know I'm rambling. Like I said, I'm not a good storyteller. So I hope this is entertaining. At least you get to learn about Panera, right? So, did that. And then that manager had left and one of the bakers had stepped up to become the bakery market manager, and those are the ones that are like responsible for everybody over the Nashville area. And she was like always asking me like, you know, advice for this, that, and the other, and I'm like, I ain't getting paid for this. So finally they asked me to come back and go back to being the assistant, which is called bakery trading specialist, BTS. When I first started, they were called professors, and then they changed the name to BTS. So I turned it down so many times. Actually, the first time I became a BTS, I turned it down because nobody wanted it, and I didn't want it, and because I knew what it was going to entail, but I kept getting begged to get it, so I took it, and I did that for like a year or two, and then that's when I quit. And then when I came back, they're like, please take this position back. And I kept turning it down. And, you know, there are people that I worked with before, and I was like, hey, do you want this position before I say yes? And I don't want to hear nothing if I decide to take this position because they keep asking me. But I know that you're interested. Do you want it? I went to a couple people and did that. So they didn't want it. So then I took it. And then one of those people bitched. And I'm like, I gave you a chance. I asked you. I don't even want to hear it right now. So you can't be mad if you had the offer and you didn't take it. So I stayed for another year or two. I was able to actually keep all my vacation time, which at that point was 5 weeks. That's how long I had been at the company. So that was pretty remarkable. They were able to do that for me. I stayed there for another couple of years, and I just couldn't take it anymore. It was just I don't like people enough to be a manager. On that aspect, it's like it's if I'm doing 5 minutes, 10 minutes here and there, like if I was doing a booth or something in a vendor, that's one thing. Having to actually deal with people and their drama every single day, 5 days a week, no, no, no. So I was like, I'm done. Bye. Um, yeah. So I'll fast forward a few years. Worked at a French bakery who supplied stuff for like I don't know 20% of the restaurants in Nashville. I now hate macarons because I must have made like 300 of them a night. I can't look at a macaron without being triggered. um, so I did that until one day the employees went to the because it was a warehouse. So what was going on? It's not like an actual store, right? This place, it was in the warehouse. So you had like warehouse space, and you had 5 ovens going on at once in different sections for different things, and that's how it was run. So I was there at night, so I was doing like the cookies and the coffee cakes and some of the croissant pastries and stuff like that, making the macs and things like that. So the guy who actually owned the place lived in California, and he would just fly in every once in a while to check out what's going on and then do whatever networking he was doing. And one day during the day, the employees showed up and the doors were locked. Nobody heard anything ever again. And then a month or two later on Facebook, I'm scrolling, and some company was selling off all of the all the machinery and racks and stuff like that. So that was very interesting. Very interesting time. After that, I went to a gluten-free restaurant that was out in East Nashville, and that place was run by somebody who knew nothing about the restaurant business, probably had no business being in the restaurant business, and it didn't last very long, probably because of all those things. I did a walkthrough on just through the restaurant for the inspections and stuff, and gave her a score. And I think the score was like 60 or something like that. I said, this is what I see. And I'm only there like, 4 hours a day, a few days a week. I am not in charge of trying to tell people what to do and whatever. That was not my position. So I gave her that score, and she just nodded it off, whatever. I kid you not, a week later, health inspectors come in. They actually got like a 66. And she came in, she was all mad and talking to all of us. And I think there was like 3 of us or 4 of us in the kitchen. And she's like, what do you think about this score? And I said, it's better than what I told you it was going to be. And she walked out. I gave you a freaking warning. This has nothing to do with my life. Well, maybe it does, because, my background is very heavy in food. So anyway, so I did that for a little bit. And then it was actually at that job, now we're going to get back to the relevancy of my background. It was at that job where I only stayed for a few months, where I was like, I have got to figure out something, because I was getting older. And you have to understand, I had jobs. I've been working since I was 14, okay? And all of my jobs were on my feet. So at this point, at like 36 years old, 37 years old, it was starting to show. There was some wear and tear, and I was like, I don't know how much longer I can really do this, So I started thinking, okay, well, what skills do I have? What can I do? And I was like, okay, I can crochet, I can make things. Let me start with that. And then I told a couple of friends, and they're like, the market's really saturated and whatever. Listen, y'all, if you ever want to start a business, everything is saturated. Everything. Don't let somebody try to stop your dream because something is saturated, okay? Everything is saturated. There are very few people who have something that's super niche, okay, that people are going to like gravitate to. So you be you, do your brand the way you want, be unique, and go for it, okay? That's all I got to say. So, because everything is saturated. So that almost stopped me, but I decided, I'm going to go ahead and just do it anyway. I totally skipped over the part where I have my own business, my cake business. I'll talk about that next time. So back to the arts. So I started going on YouTube and learning like some new things, because at that point with crochet, even though I was crocheting for years, it was blankets, it was scarves. I don't even know if I was doing anything else. I don't know. So I went on YouTube, learned to make hats, learned to make dresses, did all the things. Opened up my first Etsy where I was selling shawls. I learned how to make shawls. This is all crochet. I didn't do any knitting at the time. This was 2015, 2016. So I started doing that. I was doing okay. Started joining some groups on Facebook. And then I decided to learn to knit. I had tried to learn to knit once when I was younger from my grandmother, but like I couldn't get over to her place enough to be able to do that. She was not very mobile, so it was either me go over there or it wasn't going to happen. So I went to YouTube University and learned how to knit, and that opened up a whole wide world of stuff. Started adding knitting stuff to my Etsy shop. And then somehow I kind of gravitated toward podcasts. You know how I gravitated toward that's how it was. I didn't know anything about blocking. Like, I had never heard of the word blocking before or anything like that. And I started seeing it come up in groups about blocking. I was like, what is blocking? Blah, blah, blah. So I start going on YouTube like to figure out what this is. And there was a podcast in the UK actually that had a video. She was talking about blocking her shawl, and I was like, oh, okay. Because you don't really have to do that with crochet, so I never understood what it was about. So then when I learned out what that was, I'm watching her, and then like I see that there's other videos, so I was like, okay, let me start watching this. And then that's when I realized that there's actually a thing called knitting podcasts, because I never thought about that before. So that's how I got into watching podcasts, and that's how I learned about hand-dyed yarn. And then I was like, oh, well, let me go and start looking for channels on hand-dyed yarn. Came across Chemknits, which some of you might be familiar with her. Learned how to do, back then, her earlier videos, a lot of the stuff was dyeing with food color. I don't even think she does that anymore. She might play around once in a while. But it was all food color, and so I think I got a couple of skeins of yarn from Knit Picks or something at the time, just for fun to try it out, and did some stuff with food color, and the ball started getting rolling from there. So I learned what I needed to do for using the acid dyes, although I didn't really understand the whole having to use a dedicated dye pot. So I got a story about that. So I was dyeing up some yarn in a pot that actually I'm still using to this day. But, I was done doing the thing. The water was clear. I washed it out, put it away, right? So I don't know if it was that night or a couple days later, I'm cooking rice. And the rice is purple. And I'm like, why is my rice purple? And it dawned on me that, like, the reason why they tell you to use a dedicated dye pot, which I figured out at that point, was because it's getting into the material, right? Like into the cellular structure of the steel or whatever the material is for the pot. And that's why my rice was turning purple. So I was like, well, shit, I have to throw all this rice away. So what did I do? I think I boiled out the dye at least a couple times to get it clear, and then cooked something in it, and it came out fine, and I was like, okay, fine. That was 8 years ago. I'm still here. Everybody's healthy, so you can cook it out, but have a dedicated dye pot, please. Just save yourself the trouble and have a dedicated dye pot. Okay, we are way over time because I said 15-20 minutes and we were at a half an hour. So I know this was jumping around like I said it would. I was trying really hard, but I went off on tangents. So that was a little bit of background. If you have questions or whatever, I will address them in the next knit and chat. And yeah, I don't know what I'm going to talk about next time, but maybe we'll talk about something that's knitting adjacent or crafting adjacent. Unless you want to hear more about my background, because I got all kinds of stories. So, all right, I will see you in a month. Take care. Bye.